welcome to Zuzu's House of Cats Presents. I'm your host, artist Ellie Trier, although you can call me Zuzu. And on this podcast, I talk to my fellow artists about the magic of the creative process. We'll talk about what they make, and in particular, how they make it, their rituals and workflows, inspirations and disenchantments, ebbs and flows. We'll even take a peek behind the scenes of their businesses to see how they're using their creativity there too, and how they balance the needs of their business with the needs of their art. If you're interested in getting a behind-the-scenes look at what makes artists tick and enjoy conversations about art, creativity, neurodivergence and business, then you're in the right place. Hello and welcome back to Zuzu's House of Cats Presents. I hope you're enjoying season 2 so far. I certainly know I am. Today, the House of Cats is so happy to present the amazing Dave Conrey. Dave is an artist, a graphic designer, and a hardcore zinester, as well as being an old punk, so he and I have lots in common there. He loves sharing stories, art process, strategy, and being creatively fearless over on his Substack, which is fantastic, by the way. I am so happy to be talking to Dave today, so let's just get straight into it. Okay, so welcome, Dave. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks, so.
So Dave and I actually met many, many years ago. We were just talking about it. It was like 2013, which is about 100 years in internet years. Followed each other in various different ways over the years. And I came across you again about 6 months ago when you were doing The Hungry, which is a
hmm
newsletter about helping creative people find their people, really, and navigate the crazy world of internet marketing.
Yes. Yeah.
But you do all sorts of things. So do you want to get us started by telling us a little bit about your background, your art, how you came to be where you are now?
Yeah. So I'm an artist. I call myself an artist and designer. I'm actually a graphic designer in a former life, or sometimes I'll tell people I'm a retired graphic designer because I don't do client work anymore. Unless one of my relatives comes to me and says, "Can you design me a logo?" And then I think about it for 3 seconds and then say no. But but I use that skill though in my work all the time. So although I am an abstract artist, I the fundamentals of graphic design go into my work all the time, whether it's typography or composition or balance and line and color and all these things that are fundamentals in graphic design. So I use those often. So I can't shuck it completely. I can't shuck the moniker completely. But then I also do things like make, zines, and I've written books, and I've laid out my own books all by myself. And so like it's just one of those things I do. But I mean, that's what I do. And as far as my art is concerned, it's really everything I make is just a pursuit of like, let's see what happens, right? What if I did this, right? And then I go down that road, and then I just explore things and see how it works, and then do it a few times just to make sure that I knew what I was doing, and then so I really chase creative impulse mostly, and um, I mentioned recently on Substack notes. I said I'm more interested personally in the process
Hmm.
than I am the final result. Like once a piece is done, it's almost like, okay, well that's going in the corner for now, right? And then I'm just off to ready to figure out what can I learn about my process next.
That's fascinating. And I think there's so much of that sort of design background that comes through in your work. I mean, you do a lot of collage work and a lot of sort of mixed media, sort of bringing together of interesting things. And I don't think you can do that well unless you have an eye for design.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people attempt it, and there is, I mean, it definitely is an advantage, right? To be able to, because my design career was mostly magazines.
Mm.
Um, and so page layout was a fundamental fact of that, right? And so between a cover design versus an interior page design, I mean, there's things that you have to, there's rules you have to follow and rules that you can break. And then like it's really at the end of the day, you have to consider who it is that's reading the magazine, right?
Mm.
And so, as much as I may want to be, like just throw all my art into a magazine. I have to really be considerate of who's reading the magazine so that they can, get the enjoyment out of it that they wanted by picking it up and paying for it. And so you do that for 10 years and you just kind of like you build up this instinct for sure about like, okay, so and not that I think about when I'm making my art that I'm thinking about, oh, who's going to enjoy this as a
Mm.
customer? I don't think about it like that, but I'm just like just the framework of things and but then also being able to throw in just the most random rule breaking elements into into the composition, to make it interesting for myself.
And I think the stuff that you're doing at the moment, you're doing some really exciting work in the sort of the area of zines, which
Mm,
sort of feels like a mashup of that kind of pure, uninhibited creative process, and then the more structured sort of design, magazine style stuff. And I'm
mhm,
really interested, like having worked so much with like tangible art objects, and this is really coming through. I'm seeing it everywhere at the moment. Zines are having such a moment.
mm,
Tangible things that you can touch and feel and can see the hand of the maker in are really, really like I said, they're having a moment. They're really popular.
mhm.
What do you think it is in particular about this moment in time that is making the physical manifestation of art have this renaissance?
I'm almost certain, and only because kind of like I've been very aware of it, of this change that's happening, this shift that's happening, and I think I mean, I would say that the most critical part of it is that people are tired of the digital facing world, right? Like it doesn't bring them in, especially creative people, it doesn't bring us quite the same joy as when we spend time in front of our canvases or in front of whatever work we're doing. And it's, you know, being able to, I mean, looking at somebody's art on Instagram is great, but looking at it at the walls of a gallery is so much more fascinating, right? Or if somebody takes that and they put that into a book form and call it a zine, and then, that means, oh, I have access to it. And now I have this piece, and I'm looking at a stack of zines right over here that I've been collecting recently because I'm so fascinated with this idea. um and it's just like I think that people just want that. I mean, I watched a video recently by a YouTube creator named Struthless, and he was
Mm,
talking about this whole fundamental thing about how people are returning to old media. So they're
yeah.
going back and they're buying albums and they're buying CDs and they're buying physical books, not just because they want to have the tangible thing, but because there's something about the ownership of it. And
Mm.
we don't, we get up onto our Spotify accounts or our YouTube or our Apple TV, and it's like we have these things. I may have paid for videos on Amazon, but I don't technically own them. And if they decided to change the rules on me, I mean, what recourse do I have?
Mm.
But a DVD, I mean, aside from the technical or the physical possibilities of it being destroyed somehow, I mean, there's that. But at least it's mine. At least I have it. I can put it. I can watch it whenever I want. I don't have to worry about the internet being on, or something like that. Or like a record player, like I can listen to music anytime. I don't need internet access to do that. And so I think that's largely it. It's like people are just tired of just a digital facing world. And and not to get too deep politically, but I think that um because of the way the world is, the way things hit us in the face with all the changing political systems, I think people get tired of that too.
Mm.
And they want to remove themselves from it. Not that, like not head in the sand kind of thing, but it's like sometimes the deluge of information and the deluge of bad news or whatever is just like I just need something else. I need to step away, put headphones on, sit in a recliner and listen to an album, or something like that. So I think that's probably the two biggest factors right now.
Yeah, the internet is just getting more and more exhausting, and there's so much. I read a statistic the other day that said something like 90% of content on the internet will be AI generated by the end of this year.
Yeah, that's wild. That's why I saw something like that recently too, and it was just like that's just nutty. It's kind of nutty, right? And I think that that's probably it. I mean, AI is probably has a big factor. You're probably right there that it's just like if everything is AI generated, then how do we trust what we see,
Mm.
or who we're looking at, and so, getting out and, doing things human is going to be the novelty, you know, which is terrible, but hopefully we can shift the tide. It'll be the thing again, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I love the internet. I found my people on the internet, but I do also think it's the worst thing to ever happen to humanity, you know?
Right. The dichotomy, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
We all
Yeah.
got so
It-
overexcited about everything being available online, and then we sort of just cut analog out of our lives completely. And now I think there is this kind of very definite backpedaling to be like, oh, maybe we could just use this as a tool sometimes instead of having everything on there all the time.
yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we're pulling back before it becomes a complete dystopian nightmare.
Hmm.
Really, we're pulling ourselves back into our own realities for a moment before it be just complete destruction. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, I guess. We'll see by
Yeah.
this time next year. We'll see how we feel if the AI is taking over everything.
Oh gosh, it's all
Good.
happening so quickly. It's alarming. But
Yeah.
that makes what you do with, I mean, I've loved following your process on Substack recently with, paper and glue and there's something so visceral about the way that you're describing it as well,
Mm.
which I think is really, really lovely. Um, but one of the things you've talked about is that zines in particular are more design projects than they are art projects.
Mm.
And I'm interested in this kind of balance between that we've touched on briefly between your design brain and your art brain and how they come together in something like a zine.
So going back to the magazines that I did for the company that I work for, we everything in the magazine was whatever, we call it editorial, right? Whether it was the words or pictures, right? But it was words or art, right? And so the art was something that went into the layout, or like if I was building something, it was the art around it, right? And then of course whatever content that the editors would produce. But when you think about a layout, there's a little bit of a grain of salt with my response to that, with me saying that. But when you're taking elements and you are aligning them in a layout like a zine, you're thinking about those things. Like you're thinking about composition. You're thinking about the balance of like, oh, should this be on this page or on that page? Should it be on the left side or the right side? You're thinking about these things as you put them into that book format, for lack of a better term. And so the process of you doing that is design because you are trying to. I mean, essentially, if you get down to it, design is answering a problem.
Mm.
And the problem immediately in your presence right there is how to make this look good. How does this work for making so that other people can read it well or look at it well, or what's going to be the most intuitive way for people to flip through this book? My current scene that's I'm waiting for it to come from the printer right now. It's just art. There's nothing else in it except, I mean, there's a cover that has words on it, and there's a little bit of a nameplate on the inside, or information on the inside, but that's it. It's nothing else in there. And it I just, put a piece on each individual page. So there's not a lot of forethought there, but it's also not art. I'm not making art in that process. I'm just doing the layout.
Mm.
I'm figuring out how these pages work together. What's the flip going to look like? Right. I printed it all out and I flipped through it to see what it would look like. And what's that going to feel like to the reader or the viewer, whatever. And so that's all design, really.
Mm.
That's really what design is. And even if it is, 100% art that I'm dealing with, it's like a design mindset going into it. So,
Yeah, and there's
Yeah,
so much of that in any art process as well. Like you said, the whole kind of elements of composition and what you're actually doing with elements on a picture plane is design, even if you're doing a
mm,
very traditional painting. And even things like curating an exhibition and things like that. It's solving that
yeah,
problem, isn't it? How does this read to a viewer?
yeah, 100%. I recently went to an art show here locally because some of my friends were in it. My mom was in it, and I went to there first to drop off my mom's art because she lives out of town now, but I dropped it off for her, and they had the work on the floor like it was ready to go up on the wall,
Hmm.
and they told me very specifically, oh, put her piece right there. And so that they're already working it out. And then I was just fascinated by that because it's like they're really thinking about, okay, how do these things work? And at the same time I went back to the show a week later or whatever, and I was like, oh well, I would have put this one over there. That one over there. Right. So I think, it's just one of those things, right? Personal choice is part of it too. But yeah, the act of thinking about those things, like how is this going to feel? What's the weight going to be as you walk through this room? Or what's the weight going to be as you flip through these pages?
Weight is a really interesting word to use. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
If I were to, how do I express this? It's more of a feeling, right?
Mm.
It's like if you walk into a space, wherever it is, right? And you feel like things are like if you went into a coffee shop and they had a wall and it was filled with nothing but just art pieces all up on the one wall, and then some of the furniture was all crammed off to that side, and versus like more people were like over here kind of more sparse, and there were like windows and there was bright night, and it might feel like, okay, it feels really weighty, and like this side of the room is leaning in on me, right? As opposed to this side feels like an escape, which is probably not the right idea you want when you're getting people to stay in to get their coffee, unless what you want is them to get their coffee and leave, get out, right? But like that, or in a printed piece, as you go through it, you want it to have like an inviting, hey, open the next page. But then that, even if it's just visual elements, you can have a storytelling aspect to it just by how you've aligned the pieces so that it kind of feels like, oh, these feel light and airy. These feel a little bit more dreamy. These feel a little bit dark and foreboding, and kind of tell that story through the pages, right? And so, but then of course you don't want to stack too many of those in any one element, right? Like you just kind of want to break it up. So it doesn't feel like all of a sudden the book carries on. It feels like a lead weight in your hand because it's just so intense,
Yeah.
right? So it's just a balance, again, balance and yeah, adjusting things to kind of feel like a better flow.
Mm. I really like that way of describing it. So what is it that draws you to zines as like one thing, but also I feel like your style of art just lends itself so perfectly to this expression in the or this medium of zines because it is
Mhm.
such a it's punky and it's DIY and it's got these kind of like rough, coarse elements to it, which are really it's really dynamic. And I feel
Mm.
like having that in a book, especially hearing you talk about sort of the flow and the movement of a zine, like how does that work in your mind?
Yeah, I think it all just like everything comes full circle, right? Because the, like I said before, I'd written books and I designed my own books, like physical, well, both electronic and physical books, but
Mm,
like, like I have a book, it's it's terribly out of date, called Selling Art Online. And it was probably when you and I first met, that was
mm,
probably my first publication that I did. And it was essentially just like, hey, these are some places you can go and this is what you can do to sell your work online. And so it's just an information book. It's nothing it's nothing artistic in any
mm,
way. But I think that I've just always kind of had that instinct to want to put things into printed page,
mm.
right? And yeah, obviously it goes back to my magazine history, right?
Of
But
course, yeah.
then and zines were always a factor, and I did. a few zines when I was way younger, even before I became a graphic designer, even before I even knew what graphic design was. I did zines because it was kind of the things that my friends did, punk rock things that my friends did. But I think we even did one in one of my art classes in high
Oh,
school or
wow.
whatever. But so it was just, like an experiment or whatever to do things. And and I don't think I really took it too seriously back then, especially because back then, everything was tape and glue and, you
Yeah.
know, like cut and paste and scissors and everything. And I didn't appreciate the process back then. But now that it is kind of becoming a thing, and so, and it was this thing, it's, zines they've always been around, but it's almost like I needed the reminder
Mm.
that it existed. And, um, last year I was part of an art show here locally, and the art show was like part art, part zine. And so I'd already like my contribution to the zine thing was actually this book that I produced where I don't have it all present, so I can't hold it up for you here. But I was doing a journal, an art journal, and I called it Mag Bash and this was kind of like my journey into the kind of quick and simple collage stuff and the more punk rock stuff that I was doing.
Mm.
And it was just like it came because we were at an airport in Austin, Texas, waiting for a flight, and I had this impulse. I had this sketchbook or notebook in my backpack, and there was a magazine that I had with me, and I walked over to one of the shops and got like they happened to have a glue stick by chance. I just had on a whim went over there and they had a glue stick and a pen, and I bought that, and I just was like waiting for our flight, and I just started putting things together and elements together in that thing, and then I just started doing it, and like over time I filled up this whole journal with this, and because I was using magazine pages mostly and like the typography that I would pull from there, like cut
Mm.
out words and everything, I called it Mag Bash, and then I made a book based on that journal. And that was my zine. That's a long way around to the story. And so we did that thing, and that kind of like was my initial discovery, but it wasn't the most zine thing because it
Yeah.
almost was more book than it was zine. And so now to have it again, it was like, okay, well, wait a minute. I could go back and do this again and do it more zine-like, right? And maybe I could, do one 100% handmade. And like, I mean, not one, it's impossible for me to do it 100% handmade because I still have to print things out and I have to go
Of
find
course.
images on the internet or whatever. But, like the idea of like getting everything and printing it out, cutting it out, putting it on a page, folding those pages and, and then getting the layout right, and that, just so like if you put it on the scanner and then you print it directly from, the copier on your,
Yeah.
in my house or whatever in there. And that whole process was just so interesting and fascinating to me, that to the tangible aspects like we talked about, the getting the glue on your fingertips and nearly cutting your fingers off with an X-Acto blade, right, getting a little bit of blood on the pages, and nobody knows it better.
That's
um
authentic.
it's
That's really
right,
punk.
right, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so and that was just something interesting about that, and it was fun. And again, my 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 most the thing I pulled away from it most was the process,
Mm.
right? Right back into that whole thing. So the process of it is interesting. And what I learned from that in that moment by doing it handmade has already kind of like affected how I design
Mm.
in digitally. And even though this new one isn't really much of a layout, it's just like I was thinking about things a little differently as I was putting them together. And the next one that I've got coming on is it's actually a mini zine, but it's also going to be like this is kind of insider information here. I haven't done it yet, so it's like a little bit. It's a project, and I'm trying to manifest it right now. But it's so a mini zine is like a single page zine that you
Oh, yeah,
fold and
yeah.
you turn into 8-page zine, right? Um, it's going to be it. What's the word I'm thinking of? It's like you have a randomizer, like you have these categories of things that make up elements of a zine, like
Yeah.
like what's the format, what's the title, what's the subject, like that kind of thing. And so then you put a bunch of options in there, and then you use like like a 20-sided dice, a D20 dice from like, like what the Dungeons and Dragons people do. And you roll the
Yep.
dice and then you commit yourself to whatever that number is. That's what you design,
I love
right?
that.
And
That's
then
so cool.
and then and then the front side is like the instructions on how to build the thing, right? So it's a little bit of a like on, right there, practical in your face, and so that you can get it done. So that's the project. It seems easy, but I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it sounds.
Very meta.
But but yeah. So I don't know. Like the again, having that physical manifestation of something and just being able to put it into a printed thing, it feels tangible. It feels real. It's like when I invite people to look at my art on a wall, I'm sure they can do that, but how often are they going to do it? And a lot of my friends can't. I can't carry pieces of art in my back pocket or in my bag. But if I run into a friend and they say, "Oh, what have you been doing with your art?" I'm like, "Oh, here's what I've been doing." I can hand them a copy of my zine or whatever. So there's so many things about it that are just cool, and it's not the only thing I'm doing, but it's definitely one of these things where I feel like I could be doing this for a while. I could
Mm.
see myself building up a library of these and be happy with that.
Yeah, I've been thinking along similar lines myself actually, because I just love the way it sort of levels the playing field. The fact that anyone who's got, $10 or whatever can own art. I just think that's such a brilliant thing in a world where it has such elitist kind of connotations to be an artist or to buy art, collect art. It's all so snooty and so elitist. And whereas art is just, it's so human. It's such an expression of our humanity. It's such an expression of connection and communication between people. And having
Mhm.
something, like you say, that you can keep in a backpack, you can just hand it out. You can go to the library and hide it in between your favorite books. It feels like
Yeah,
such a great leveler and a fun way for people to discover you, but also a fun way for people to invest in your journey as you're going through life as an artist.
yeah. It's also, and I look at it also like um a way to like, like it's an easy creative gift. Like if gifting it to somebody is just like, or saying a thank you. Like I said, when I say thank you cards, I send usually one of my zines with, some people, right? Or to some people because I wanted to like, hey, here's something I've been working on that maybe you haven't seen me do. Or, like this is something that was special to me. Now I want you to have a copy of it. So I don't know. It's just it's a little piece of me,
Mm.
right? And even though maybe it's printed and it doesn't have my actual hand in the work right there, but it's something, right? And it feels like I still made it, and
Yeah,
it feels like I'm giving that away. I'm giving that to you, and I'm gifting that to the people. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now you were talking about the one that you've made in a really like super analog way. I think you originally intended to make it all at the library as well. Is that right?
yes, yeah, yeah,
That's ambitious. But
yeah.
you've
It was
also
ambitious.
you've also am I right in thinking you've made one which is completely digital as well with that
Yeah.
art that's all digital? Can you tell us a little bit about the two opposing sides of that? Like, what was the experience like? How was it different?
I didn't think about it the way like the juxtaposition of those two things until just now. But yeah, it's interesting. Well, okay, so the physical one was like I just wanted to get back to the grassroots, right? And then the idea of doing it at the library was more of like I don't need there like is could I potentially do this with simply having a phone where I could take pictures of things that I saw in a book or a magazine and then carry that over, have it printed there, cut it out with some scissors or even tear it if I needed to, um, just to, like do the whole thing here. If I could do that, then I have zero excuses about why it's possible, or if it's even possible. And um, it the thing about the library, I mean, I guess, and it depends on which library I would go to, but the systems they built on how to get through some of those hurdles, like to print something, is very arcane. And And I probably could have done it there, but I probably would have been massively frustrated the entire process. And so at a certain point, I was like, okay, it's possible to do it. You could definitely do it, but you would definitely need to be very um, patient with the process, and it wouldn't happen in a day. I mean, I guess potentially you could, depending on how complex. My pieces were very complex
Mm.
for that zine, and they were going to require a lot of like thinking about things. And I think like I was also trying to film the whole process, and then
Oh
the
no.
the library people were just like looking at me weird, and then the people around me were looking at me weird. That was part of it too. It's just like this is just not. I was just trying to add too many factors into the
Mm.
process to make it easily done. So, but yeah, having that physical version of it was great, and then. I mean, it was unintentional that I went completely the opposite way and did it digitally, but so there's Procreate is an app you can get on your iPad, right? But they also have an iPhone version, which is obviously smaller, right?
Mm.
And it's essentially the same app. It's just like it looks a little different because of the layout of the phone, and it's more challenging to make pieces in it because of less screen opportunity. And like I can't use an Apple Pencil. Everything had to
Mm.
be done with my fingers, right? And so, clipping something out was very challenging. But I'd made plenty of pieces in it,
And they were
because of like if I
gorgeous as well.
yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. And it was just, I used it before. It's just like idle time. Like if I'm at the airport and I want to do some art, like that app was great. I used that app, or I used another app that would help me, manage some images or whatever. But um the goal was to like, how can I make a zine entirely, or an art zine entirely on my phone? And essentially like I made all those pieces in Procreate app, and then saved them out, and then uploaded them directly to the company who was going to print the magazine, or the zine for me. And they have an online um like builder, so to speak.
Mm.
Like you could build the pages right there in the process, and it doesn't have to be done in one fell swoop. Like you can, like it holds your information, so
Oh,
I
cool.
could make some pieces and then go put them in there, and make some more pieces, go put them in there, and I could rearrange them, and so I did that entirely on the phone. I think there was one point where, I made my cover design because I wanted to be more so I get really precious with my covers. And so typography was really more more important to me at that point. And I hadn't really formulated what I wanted the cover to look like. So I went into my regular computer and built a cover. But the artwork of it was all done within the phone. And so yeah, and then so I just did that, and now I don't have them yet. They're en route right now, and but yeah, it's a 24 page, half page zine folded, whatever. And so, um, yeah, I'm looking forward to I really I tried to go all the nicest levels of paper there is to make it like so because it's my art. I want it to be like, I want it to look nice, but
Yeah.
still kind of have that ziny aspect to it.
That's so cool. And I mean, for both of these, you had really sort of interesting creative constraints that you put on yourself. Is that something that
Mm.
you do a lot with your work? Will you like decide to do a project within certain parameters, or is it just a coincidence?
No, I mean that's really it, right? I try to I say that I live creatively fearless, right? Because I've just kind of like built up this armor of never being afraid of a blank canvas. Um, because if a blank canvas is standing me in the staring me in the face and I don't know what to do with it, well, then I'll just grab a handful of paint and throw it on there, right? Or grab a spray paint can and write a word on there, and like that ultimately may not even be show through by the final piece, but like I don't have any fear of just doing a thing.
Mm.
And it's just kind of become one of these things where I have challenged myself, like what would happen if is like like kind of like my mantra when it comes to art. Um, there's a piece in the house right now. I call it my most important piece, And it came from I'm in my garage studio right now, and we had several years back, I think it was 2007, we had a really heavy rain season. So much so that it like part of the garage got flooded, but I didn't realize it. And I had a bunch of canvases, like big canvases, like meter size or larger pieces. And I I had them in the corner, and when I came back in after a hiatus of like not wanting to be in the garage because it was wet and damp and ugly, I pulled some of these canvases out, and they were completely destroyed, like just moldy and dirty and nasty, and like some of them, like the canvas had completely pulled away, and I was just so I I salvaged some, and I got rid of the mold and all this stuff. I re-gessoed them and everything, and then, but there was this one that was like kind of like it was all destroyed, and it was like that I had to tear apart the canvas off of it, but it didn't really, like I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it because the majority of the canvas was still the structure there. So what I used it for is like if I was going to use spray paint in a piece, I would just use that as my like cast off. Like, oh, I'm going to test my paint over here,
Yeah.
right? Or I'm going to wipe off my brush, my excess, and put it on that. Um, Jump ahead. It was like that for a while. Jump ahead to, a couple years later, I went to an art gallery, and this is a long story, but it's interesting to me. Um, I went and saw Jasper John's exhibition, and we all know Jasper Johnson's work. We think of like the American flag or the numbers or things like that. But the pieces that most people don't know about Jasper Johns are these pieces where it was like it's the actual substrate or the canvas, but it's turned around, right? And then it's like he uh he just assembles all these different pieces like a studio broom or like this ruler that he had that he would draw lines with, right? And and just like these elements and like string and like very like three-dimensional, like sculptural in a way.
Yeah.
And I was just fascinated with it, right? Because it felt like I don't want to paint the front of the canvas anymore. I want to see what happens if I do this, right? And and it was just like that. I was just in awe of that, and I went down a rabbit hole of looking into all the other pieces that were like that and of his because he did like a whole series of them. It was later
Wow.
in his career, but it was just interesting to me. So then I'm sitting back here in the studio, and I'm looking at that canvas with my discard canvas, and it's got this torn edge, and it's like just dirty on the side, literally, like still to this day has like a dirt stains on one side or on the bottom side. And I just started painting this, like I took my brightest orange spray paint, and I just sprayed that side where the tear marks were, the torn parts were. I just sprayed big orange spot there, and then I wrote on it, this, I don't remember it. This used to be decay, now it's art, right? I say it differently, but I'm blanking out of exactly what I wrote in there. But I wrote that literally, and then I just started compiling elements on there to just kind of create this layout. And I was doing different things. It was the very first time used a trashy canvas, but it was also the very first time I took a piece of large like craft paper that I'd painted on, and I just glued that directly onto the canvas, and that's still very prominent in the piece. And it's just bright and garish and powerful to me. And it's like, and that was it. Like from that moment, I was just like, this is where I'm headed. And it changed everything for me because it was just like, I wonder what happens if, right? What what if I do that? What goes next, right? And so it's a long-winded story for me to get around, where it's just like I've just felt great about the idea of like asking myself that question and seeing what I can make of it. And so that's just kind of like, and it goes back to what I was saying before about how the process is all so much more interesting to me than the final piece.
Yeah. I absolutely fucking love that story. I love it so much. And I really want to go and look at these Jasper John pieces because I've never seen them before. And I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by that. I love things like Joseph Cornell's boxes, which are basically just boxes full of things he found in the street that he thought were
Mhm.
interesting and put them all together and made a composition out of it. And yeah, found art and trashed art. And a lot of my favorite pieces have come from like tearing a canvas or like stitching it back together. And the pieces I'm making at the moment are all like stuff that's just glued onto canvas and like stitched in and it's this whole sort of two-dimensional, almost three-dimensional sculptural thing, but it's still within the confines of the traditional picture plane. And I think anything like that, like we're I love a good painting, don't get me wrong, but I think there's so much more we can do. And I think people are
Mhm.
so fucking terrified of
Mhm.
pushing the boundaries and getting it wrong or doing something bad, but that's where the magic happens. And you that story just proves it. That's where you find your particular flavor of magic.
Yes, 100%. And and I've really pushed the three-dimensional aspect of my work as well, whereas like now I'm using like heavy body acrylics not to paint so much as rather just to kind of build up layers of like these what I call I'm calling this whole new series of work this three-dimensional pieces 0 point, where it's like if the humans immediately left the planet, what would happen to nature? Nature would start taking over all of these things that we have, whether it was like a car on the street or a building or furniture or whatever. Like nature would just start to take over. And so I build these things that look like that, like it's almost like nature is adding itself to my work. And these things that like these growths and these spores and things like that, like it just like or how the elements kind of fold into themselves to become nature itself, things like that. And so, yeah, that exploration is, yeah, it's super interesting. It just feels like I've expanded my mind beyond the flat
Mm,
of the canvas, and I still do flat pieces. Obviously, all the work I've done digitally has to be flat for the most part. And, even some of the collages I do are flat because sometimes I just want that. But
mm.
like being able to push out, right? I find stuff on the ground all the time. I found a piece of, I don't know, caution tape on the ground, but it was all crumpled up in this particular format. And it was like something that was very interesting about that. And I immediately turned that and glued that onto one of my canvases. And it became like the main factor of this piece. It was just, and it worked well with the colors the palette that I use. So it was great. I love that.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. My brain is just buzzing. Like I can't think of words
Yeah.
anymore because now I just want to go and paint and make stuff.
Right. Right. I'm thinking about a piece that's on my studio desk right behind me right now, thinking like, oh, I know what I want to do with it now.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit.
Mhm.
Because I also want to touch on you are an artist in public. You are an artist who makes a living from your work in some form or another. And obviously you do the art, you do design stuff, you're making these zines, you write books, you teach people stuff, you're constantly sharing helpful stuff with people on the internet about being creative. How do you decide what element to prioritize at any given time? Like, how do you decide when you wake up in the morning, like, today's a writing day, today's a sharing day, today's a curation day, today's an art day? Like, what does that look like for you?
So Uh, that is a tough question because I mean, I try really hard to prioritize my time. Like I've tried to get in the habit on like Sunday, Sundays, trying to organize like what's going to happen for the week. Um, because one of the things that's a major factor is that I like right lately, this last several years, I have been a sports dad first and foremost. Like that's my primary job right now. My son is a swimmer and a water polo player, and he's good. And so we're at practices a lot. And he's at
Mm,
school, and so I run around and do things. And so everything I do here in the studio is kind of almost um, dictated by where do I have to be to take my son to next, right? That's just kind of how it's working. And so, and I love being part. It doesn't feel like he's taking me away from anything because I love being part of his life right now. And so, anyway, I try to get myself organized, right? But then it's just because I'm also the artist, and I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I do feel like I'm probably somewhere.
I was going to
I'm
ask,
somewhere
to
in the
be
range
honest.
here, right? I'm definitely in there somewhere, but um, w the idea of like wanting to plan something, right? And then having coming into the studio to do that, but then immediately getting distracted because there's a little my journal sitting there just unfinished, and I walk by it and like the last, I just think like, oh, I know what I want to do here right now. And so, oh, I'm just going to add this little bit. I'm going to add a little bit to it. Next thing you know, 2 hours later, I've,
Hmm.
done 3 canvases or whatever, like, or whatever, it's, it's just one of those things where it's like, I try to structure, I mean, I give myself a little bit of a calendar, right? I know I'm going to publish something on Tuesdays, and I know I'm going to publish something, this is on Substack, publish something on Tuesdays, publish something on Fridays. I have that. Um, and then yeah, I figure out how to get it done in within the constraints of the time that I have available. And usually, a lot of times, the Friday one is by seat of my pants because that's usually my more long form one. It's usually one where I do a little bit more study, a little bit more research, a little bit more thought. But press like it always goes out at 12:15, Pacific time, and I'm always like 12:14. Okay, still checking the edits. Right, right. Uh, so I I can't say that I'm fantastic at keeping myself organized, but I know that um, what I feel like is the most important part is working on something and getting it done, and then putting out there, pressing the publish button, posting up whatever it is that I want to post, whether it's a new piece for, just to share, or if it's a new product that I want to put up on my shop or whatever. Just doing it and getting it done. That's the most important part. It's not about like, what am I going to do from day to day to day? Like, what's my week look like? I know there are things that there obligations that I have, and I try to get those done as consistently as possible. But when it comes to balancing it all, yeah, like I don't know. I know, like, so this past weekend, he had it. Last week, my kid had some really important swim meets, and so this past weekend, we just kind of wanted to chill. We just wanted to relax, and we didn't. I mean, we went to like a movie and hung out, and I didn't do anything. I didn't. I mean, I don't think I painted. I didn't do any art. I didn't work on any projects. I didn't do anything the whole weekend. And I knew it going into Sunday. I'm gonna be like, I am going to be screwed if I don't figure this out. And, then Monday came and I don't know, I didn't die. So it worked out all right. Right. So yeah, I'm not probably the best to talk about when it comes to schedule, guy, but you know, you tell me to finish a project and I'm on it, right? I mean, well, if you told me to do it, I'd be like, no. But but if you said, hey, there's this project you should work on, I'm like, okay, let's go, right? I'm into it, right? And I'll be in it until I finish it.
Do
So
you work in kind of like a monotropic way, where just like this one project, this is what I'm working on, like, and then when it's done, I'll start the next one.
yeah, for the most part. Um, so one of the things that I've been doing lately is I'm getting back into putting up digital products, for other people to use in their work, right? So textures, and I have fonts that I have, and some other little elements, like the things I've built over time, and I'm starting to reintroduce those back into my shop. And so um, I'm trying to be a little bit better about integrating those into like integrating the process of putting those up on a shop in my daily process. But um, for the most part, yeah, I'm really kind of deep focused on like whatever. Like, I mean, the zine that I just did, like I finished that, got it out the door. It's all done. That took a really long time to do because I was doing 24 pieces of art to put into this thing, and so that took a while. So obviously, I had to do something with my time otherwise. But it felt so bad. Like I felt uh, like when I wasn't getting it done fast enough. I was like, God, I was like a little bit itching. Like I need to get back to it so I can get it done and out the door. Because if I don't hit the publish button, right, it just feels off to me. And so
Mm.
like yeah, so I for the most part, I like I'll work on something until it's done for the like some of these pieces that I do where I use like the heavy body acrylics like I was talking about. Those things take time
Yeah.
because I can't just immediately dig in because I got to let that stuff dry up, and so then to move on to the next phase, and so um, I force a little bit of patience on myself in that, and then I have to move into something else. So I do work on things occasionally, but for the most part, just I'm very very focused.
And do you have any rituals or workflows or anything to around your art making?
Um, Not really. Probably the biggest ritual would be like music. Music is probably my number one ritual. Like when I'm making, I like. I was working on a piece just the other day and I didn't have music on, and it like I felt like I didn't think about it that it was that I didn't have the music on, but I was noticing that it was like coming very fluidly. And so I I was just like I was struggling with it a little bit, and then I was just like, I'm gonna turn some music on. And as soon as the music came on, right, I was right. I was just aligned, right, and the thing came out really nicely. So there's that. I think that having a bit of a mise en place,
Hmm.
with my materials and everything on the table is important. I mean, I can't always know what I'm going to use at any given time. I'm very impulsive with that. I'm very intuitive with the work that I do, but I try to have my here on the desk, I just try to have the things that I know I need in that moment because I don't want to be fetching them. I
Mm.
want them there so I can just easily access. But they change from one project to the next. So like I use different materials all the time. So I never know what that is. I'm just gonna go with the impulse of whatever it is. But like I try to have some of that stuff readily available. And it's a mishmash. I'm looking over it right now, and it's paint pens and Mod Podge and yeah, X-Acto blades, and there's a stapler over there for this for stapling the scenes, and there's rulers, and there's a camera, and there's all kinds of stuff up there.
Do you work best in chaos? Does that like feed you creatively, or do you get a bit overwhelmed every now and again?
It's a good question. I mean, I know I work in chaos sometimes. I don't know if I work best in it. I think that the chaos is in the process sometimes because it's like my work can be, like I said, it's intuitive for sure and definitely frenetic at moments, you know. Um, so there is a little bit of that. And then if you look at the work, it feels chaotic at times. I keep staring up here at the wall at this piece that I still think is a work in progress, but it's probably one of the most chaotic pieces I've ever done. And I don't know how much I love it or hate it, but the chaos is there for sure. But I'm thinking about it now. If I go back to my design instincts, like design is a framework,
Mm.
especially with the stuff I do. And so I work within some of my parameters or my limitations, right? And that keeps the chaos from expanding out too far, right? I'm holding it in the box there. So in the moment, sure, there can be a little bit of chaos there because I don't know what I'm like. I never plan a piece going in. Never do it. I've tried to do it and
Mm.
it never turns out well. So it's yeah, so I just go with my intuition on everything, and that can be tragic at times, but also completely open to the possibility that I could just use it as a layering opportunity, right? If something doesn't work well, I can just layer on top of it. So yeah. Chaos exists, but I think I keep it at bay to a certain degree. Just don't get in my way when I'm working,
I find the
flinging
chaos
paint
like
and
really inspiring. up to a point where it becomes completely paralyzing and I have to like deep clean the studio or I can't do any more work.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah.
fine balance between the two.
Yeah, I mean, my studio right now in this exact moment is kind of in a chaotic state because I'm I reorganized it a little bit, and I'm probably it's in process. I went and bought a used bookshelf that I'm trying to squeeze over into this corner, but it doesn't quite fit, and so now I have to take the part of the bookshelf and cut it down to make it fit over there. And then I've got so I went to the gym the other day and there's a new build, like a construction build that's or well, I think right now they're tearing it down and building something new, but there's a bunch of posters up on the wall. Right, like that have been painted over and
Yeah.
then repostered, and that's one of my favorite art materials
Yeah.
is like tearing those posters, and so there's like a giant like I never know how to pull myself back. Like once I start, it's like one of those things. Like you start pulling it, like you just can't stop pulling on it. It's
Yeah.
just you're gonna pull on that thread for a while. It's that I just go walk around this whole building. I'm just like pulling these huge swaths of distressed paper with, words on it. And I'm just like so turned on by the whole process, but I'm doing it just like, I love this. And the exciting, like, think like people walking by, like, what's he doing? And I'm like, I don't care, and the like hoping the police don't come by and ask the same question, right? Because I'm doing the opposite of what they probably want. It says post no bills. I'm just helping them out, right? I'm taking things down. But yeah, so I have that whole thing stacking over there, and like and I've moved things around to make space there, and so the room is a little chaotic at the moment, right? But it also, at the exact same time, that stresses me out a little bit. So I need to get that project finished. As soon as I get that project finished, then I'll be golden. So that's probably my most pressing project right now. Is that?
Oh, it's never the one that you really want to work on in the moment, though, is it? The most
No,
pressing
no,
one.
no. Right, right.
So the question I ask everybody right at the end is what advice would you give to artists who are interested in turning creativity into their full-time thing? What have you learned along the way that you'd like to share?
I think that fear when it comes to art, when it comes to creativity, isn't as real as you think it is. It's not, it feels like when you're scared to do certain things or like a little hesitant or a little reluctant to, I talk to people often about um, publishing a zine, like, and the response I get from love is, I've always wanted to publish a zine. It's like, well, go do it, right? Like, the process is simple. What's getting in your way is the resistance of your fear of that like, oh, is it going to look good, is it going to be bad, is it, like, am I going to do it wrong, am I going to waste money, things like that. It's like you just pushing back against that fear to get through to the thing that you want, even if it isn't the greatest thing that you produce. I mean, at least it's teaching the lesson that the fear is weak. It's like it's a paper monster standing in your way, and it pushes back, and I mean, it'll always come back. Like it still comes back even for me, right? But I've fought it so many times now that I know how to beat it, and it doesn't scare me anymore. And so I think it really comes down to that. Like, don't let fear keep you from the things that you want to make. Don't let fear get in the way of the things that you want to share, right? Because we've built it up in our heads more than it is real, right? And so I think that's just like being okay with putting stuff out there, pressing the publish button, and being okay with the result, right? And then if it worked, great. If it didn't work, okay, moving on. Next thing, try again. Don't let it hurt you. Just do it again. Just do the whole process again, or try something new. And, you know, don't be held back by that, because I think that I have a phrase I say that fear holds us back from greatness, and I think that our greatness is on the other side of whatever that next project is, or the next one, or the next one, And so it's just one of those things that um, yeah, I think if we spent more time being fearless in our creativity, that we would be more happy.
Brilliantly put. Brilliantly put. I love it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got about painting was it's just paint. What
Yeah,
are you worried about? It's just paint.
right.
I have to repeat it to myself. Even now, I've been doing this for so many years, and even now I have to say it to myself sometimes, like, it's just paint.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
brilliant.
mean, when I started making those pieces where I was like adding the heavy body acrylics, it's like literally squeezing large globs of paint out of this tube that costs money. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this feels great, but this is very expensive right now. And and I was just like, but the result was so satisfying to me that I was just like, that's just how I don't use it. I don't paint strokes really anymore.
Mm.
Like I don't paint things. I make things out of whatever I can put together. Right? Like let's create the form based on whatever it is that I can put forth. I mean, not entirely true. I do paint once in a while, but for the most part, like I'm looking at your pieces that are behind you there, and I love how the red cat is actually like a reversal, right? It feels like in a reverse
Mm.
piece, and that's exactly it. Like I'm building that based around whatever I can lay into it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that. It's like an act of sort of co-creation with the materials. Like you have
mm,
your input, but the materials are talking back.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's well put. Yeah.
Dave, this has been such a lovely chat. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with me today. I know people are going to absolutely love this. If they have fallen in love with you and they want to come and find out more about what you're up to in the world, can you tell us where to find you on the internet?
And the best place to go is just daveconry.com. That'll lead you to my Substack.
Which
And
is excellent, by the way.
thank you. Okay, yeah, just go from there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And you offer paid subscriptions on the Substack as well. There's like a free version and a paid version, is that right?
Yeah, I do well because I give out these digital assets to my
Hmm.
paid members and stuff like that, and try to do some live some I was supposed to do a live video today of how I do a thing, right? And then my schedule, I double booked myself in a different way, so like it's too busy. So, but yeah, so that's it, like instruction and digital goods and things like that too. So.
Fantastic. And all of Dave's links will be in the show notes, and so you can come there and find that if you're listening and you can't get to it straight away. But Dave, thank you so much for this. This has been an absolute treat.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate it. I had a great time talking.
How cool was that? I absolutely love the conversations I have on this podcast where all of a sudden I just feel the urge to go and paint. It's so exciting and so inspiring, and I'm so grateful to all of my guests for being brilliant, and particularly Dave. What a fabulous conversation. If you are interested in finding out more about Dave and seeing a picture of his most important piece, as he described it, then do come over to the show notes at zuzushouseofcats.com, and that's house, HAUS /podcast. And that's where you'll find all of Dave's information and those images and everything else you could possibly want to know. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.